Act 1 of 3 Dialogues by Barry Payne. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 3 Dialogues by Barry Payne. Act 1. Birth.
Mr. Arthur Agar, read by Todd.
Lady Rothen, read by Linda Olson Freitag.
Miss Stewart, read by Alex Barona.
Mrs. Agar, read by Beth Thomas.
Mrs. Blake, read by Jessie Percival.
Mrs. Girder, by Eva Davis.
Mrs. Sturt, read by Marianne.
Honorable Rupert Jervis, read by Philip Gould.
Alicia Theodora Eltham Jervis, read by Jenna.
And narrated by Devora Allen. The scene is the drawing room in Mrs. Honford Blake's house in Mayfair. The time is the afternoon, 3 days after the birth of Alicia Theodora Eltham Gervis, daughter of the Honourable Rupert Gervis and Theodora his wife, and granddaughter of Mrs. Honford Blake. The room is large and fussy. There are only 2 men in it, Mr. Arthur Agar, a sexagenarian, and Rupert Gervis. They talk apart. At least, Mr. Agar talks, and the young father listens as well as can be expected under the circumstances. Around Mrs. Honford Blake is gathered a pretty feminine group. Mrs. Agar, who is dark-eyed, red-lipped, and 30 years younger than her husband. Mrs. and Miss Sturt, who are both doing good work, but are less plain than one would have supposed. And Mrs. Hector K. Girder, who is just too perfectly sweet for words. Lady Rothen is upstairs inspecting Alicia Theodora Eltham Gervis, but she will be down directly. Do wait. There is a sound of talk and teacups. Outside in the hall there is a gentle rain of cards of congratulation and inquiry. The muffled knocker is busy, and from time to time one hears the soft thud of a sample packet of baby's food in the letter-box.
Yes, Theo is wonderful. The doctor is more than satisfied. But that does not prevent me from taking every possible precaution.
How right.
How
wise.
I have to exercise my authority a little. What is the use of being a grandmother if one doesn't? Now there's Rupert.
Ah, yes.
We are all so fond of him, but really, at such times the father is a perfect nuisance in the house. But for me, he would be in and out of Theo's room all day. I have had to make the strictest rules about it. And it's so bad for him, too. He goes nowhere and does nothing but mope about the house. His only occupation is to walk to Regent Street once a day to buy a ring or bangle for Theo.
Now, I call that just too sweet. Why, when my little girl was born, Hector meant well, but he didn't know anything but guava jelly. The supply of guava jelly got so far ahead of the demand that I had to speak about it.
Now really, Nancy.
I'm telling you the truth. Hector's like that, and so are many men. When one is ill, they get bubbles in their think tanks and guava on the brain, and you've got to put up with it.
I don't know whether Mr. Jervis wants an occupation, Miss Blake, but if he does, I am sure we could find him one. Mamma and I are trying to get up a...
Now, Mrs. Blake, you really must tell us more about that little angel upstairs. £8, you said?
And a half.
Oh, that's splendid.
Looking defiant and speaking rapidly.
I've got no babies of my own, you know, but I adore them and know all about them. I think the names you have chosen are quite perfect, aren't they, Nancy?
Why, yes. It's most important to get a child named properly. Now, Hector wanted to call our little girl Georgina Washingtonia, but I wouldn't have it. I'm patriotic, but there is a limit. Why, what do you mean, I said. That's unlucky. Suppose she took it from the name and couldn't tell a lie. How would she get on? It's as bad as making her colorblind. So, we called her Irene Veronica.
Nancy, you are altogether beyond.
Personally, I have always set my face against even the ordinary social—
At this moment Lady Rothen enters in a state of ecstasy, hands clasped, eyes bright, triumphant.
Seen it, held it, kissed it.
Her, not it.
Of course, poor mite. She's a little woman. Kissed her. Her.
Now, Lady Rothen, you mustn't be so proud. We've all been up, and we've all taken her.
Lady Rothen, with supreme dignity.
But she didn't cry when I took her. Her.
She only cried with me because she wanted my new hat. And I don't blame her. I nearly cried myself before I persuaded Hector that I couldn't live without it. That's a child with ideas. That's a child that will get on.
I think I should care for hats too. If only I could put out of my mind the many toiling millions who never know what it is to have even the simplest.
Arthur Agger, aside to his wife.
I say, what's the devil's the use of sticking here? Can't we go?
Oh, Arthur, I'm taking Nancy to Paquin's in the Brom. You can't come there. You had better take a taxi to your club.
What? A taxi? Stuff and nonsense. I'll take the bus.
The Aggers and Mrs. Girder go out. Rupert Gervis makes for the door, but is swept back again by a rolling tide of Sturt. They pin him in a corner and tell him all about a cottage hospital. Lady Rothen becomes suddenly confidential in her manner.
Jane, I oughtn't to say it, I suppose, but I hate that woman.
What, Mrs. Girder?
Oh, no, she's a darling, in spite of her frivolity. She's a good wife and a good mother. It isn't Mrs. Agger that I hate. That woman dishonours her sex.
But, my dear, you surprise me. I have never heard a word against Mrs. Agger. Not the faintest breath of scandal.
I don't mean that. It's her marriage makes me furious. Her beauty even now is a joy to look at. She had youth, health, and the sweetest ways. She would have been a bride for a king among men, and she marries that thing. Do you mean to tell me that she or any woman could by any possibility love that disgusting brute?
Shh, really?
I can't help it. It makes my blood boil. Men of that type should be made to understand that with all their wealth there are some things that they can't buy. Women who marry them are traitors to their sex.
Well, my dear, I don't know. He's not nice to look at, and his manners and customs are slightly— what shall I say?
Repulsive's a good word.
Well, they certainly are not tempting. But everybody is agreed that he's the kindest of husbands. She spends money like water and has everything she wants.
Everything?
Well, it's no good breaking her heart about that. She is in many ways a most fortunate woman, and I don't know that we have any fair grounds for saying that she isn't fond of her husband. All women are not alike. Any sign of strength tells, and his big fortune is a sign of strength.
Or unscrupulousness.
He's generous, she's grateful, and how far is it from gratitude to love?
About as far as from the earth to the moon and back.
Don't you believe the sentimentalists, my dear, or the cynics either. I've seen many such marriages arrange themselves very well indeed in practice. It ought to turn out all wrong, but in my experience it doesn't. And I'm an old woman now.
You? You're the youngest grandmother in London. We won't quarrel, Jane, but I warn you that if you are Alicia's grandmother, I am her godmother, and I will never let her make a marriage like that.
Well now, my dear, what sort of husband would you approve for Alicia?
Lady Rothen, unhesitatingly.
A soldier.
I know you will think me sadly unromantic, but I cannot agree with you. We three women, you, Theo, and I, have the child's happiness to consider. and what is superficially attractive is not always the most conducive to happiness in the long run. Your soldier might be very desirable in every other way, but there are the risks of his profession to be considered. Think of Alicia, left perhaps at the age of 30, with a lifelong sorrow and loneliness. On the other hand, if she married a capitalist, she need not necessarily take the oldest and the ugliest. He would not be exposing himself to any such risks.
No, they generally take good care of themselves.
There would be no fear that she might lose her husband before they had been married a year, perhaps.
No fear? You mean no hope?
Mrs. Blake, rather warmly.
Really, I think you let your tongue run away with you. You cannot seriously mean.
Lady Rothen, with equal warmth.
I assure you that whatever you may think about it.
At this moment, Rupert Gervis and Mrs. and Miss Sturt come forward together.
Well, what's all the quarrel about?
Lady Rothen and Mrs. Blake suddenly realize what the quarrel really is about.
Jane, if you tell him, I'll never speak to you again.
I don't dream of telling him. It's nothing that concerns you, my dear Rupert, at least not at present.
All right. Regular bag of mysteries this house is nowadays.
He goes to the door.
You are not to go up to Theo.
Rupert, gloomily.
All right. Wasn't going to. Only fetching my checkbook.
He has been kind enough to promise us a donation for one of our charities. You were more fortunate than I, Lady Rothen. Alicia was asleep when I saw her.
Isn't she adorable?
To think that there is a new little life come into the world.
That little bundle of flannel, how many hearts she may break.
She may have an influence over men.
She may change the map of Europe.
She may alter our theory of the universe.
I wonder what she would say if she could know what lies before her. Here she is, and she doesn't know what is to happen to her. She was never asked. Here she is, poor mite, and she has got to go through with it. Really, I wonder what she would say.
The door opens as Rupert returns, envelope in hand. From the upper story of the house is heard, faintly in protest, the voice of Alicia Theodora Eltham Gervis. A.T.E. Gervis, in the distance.
Nothing wrong with her lungs, at any rate.
Rupert, handing the envelope to Mrs. Sturt.
Here's that,
Thank you so much. I always find it easy to get money from people who have just had a great joy or a great sorrow. I wonder why it is.
Reason upset, I suppose.
I expect he adores the child, doesn't he?
If I may be allowed an opinion, he doesn't.
What?
No, I'm not particularly fond of it. I'm naturally slow, and I don't know it well enough. I shall get fond of it, but I can't manage the instantaneous enthusiasm and interest that you all can. You've settled its marriage already, haven't you?
There may have been something said.
I didn't know you were listening.
Wasn't. Conjectured it. You've mapped out a career for her. You've settled whether she is to be buried or cremated, and how she ought to leave any property of which she may have a disposing power. The way of a woman with a baby astounds me, especially when it's somebody else's baby. How do you manage to fall in love instantaneously with a 3-day-old infant who talks like this?
He opens the door. A.T.E. Gervis, in the distance.
We are just going. If you would like to run up, Jane, to see that everything's all right.
I confess, I didn't quite like the sound of that cry.
Nor did I.
It sounded to me as if the child were in pain. I think I should like to reassure myself. But don't go.
Must, unfortunately.
Goodbyes. Kiss-pecking. Mrs. Blake goes up to the nursery. Rupert, with almost indecent alacrity, scoops Lady Rothen into her brougham, removes the 2 sturts, who will walk, and closes the front door. He surveys the empty hall.
Coast clear? That's all right.
He slithers stealthily and rapidly up the stairs to Theo's room. End of Act 1. Act 2 of 3 Dialogues by Barry Payne. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 3 Dialogues by Barry Payne. Act 2. Marriage.
Anna. Read by Leanne Yao.
Edward Hearn. Read by Philip Gould.
And narrated by Devorah Allen. The scene is a bleak hill surmounted by a ruined chapel outside a provincial town. It is a clear day in spring, the air still and the sun shining. One can see the housetops and the church spire in the valley below, and hear an inordinate sound of joyous bells. A man, Edward Hearn to be precise, with a dead-beat face, a worn blue serge suit, a briar pipe, which he is smoking too fast and biting too hard, an age of 25 years, and an artistic temperament, has climbed to the top of the hill in search of solitude. So also has a woman, Anna LaRose to be accurate, who has 20 years, was awake all last night and crying most of the time, and is beautiful on fire and darkness lines. As he turns the corner of the chapel he meets her, to the disgust of both. She really smiles, and he contorts his mouth with a similar purpose, but a different result. They shake hands.
What? You?
Yes, I suppose so.
Do you mean to tell me that Mrs. Jervis hasn't requested the pleasure of the assistance of Mr. Hearn at the marriage of her daughter, Alicia Theodora Eltham, and all the rest of it?
Oh, yes, I was asked.
But you surprise me. I've met you at their house so often, and it was always thought that you and Alicia were such good friends.
Very good friends.
Then why aren't you there?
In case you meet any of them, and hear my name mentioned, I am at the present moment in London, whither I have been summoned by Messrs. Agnew to settle about the sale of one of my pictures.
But you are not in London.
If we are going to be accurate, neither have I sold a picture, neither am I likely to sell a picture, neither have Messrs. Agnew ever heard of me, nor would it make the least difference to them if they had.
What an unnecessarily elaborate fib!
Yes, I know it's not good. Men get so little practice.
And the real reason why you are here, instead of being in your place in the church, is that the artistic temperament loathes the big social function.
The real reason why I am here is that I wanted to be alone.
Anna, not in the least angry, but recognizing that her self-respect requires that she shall not take this tamely.
I was just going on in any case. It was not necessary to be insufferable.
I beg your pardon. I hardly know what I'm saying this morning. Do please stop.
If I am to stop, it will perhaps occur to you that I also may wish to be alone.
All right. I'll go if you like. I hate the world this morning, and I think you know why. But I wish you would let me stay with you. Down in the street or in some infernal drawing-room I should be civil enough and say the usual things about croquet and so on. But here we are, a woman and a man out of the world, and you were one of her best friends, and—
As you wish. Stop if you will. I'm horribly tired. Can't you find somewhere where we can sit down?
Yes, you look tired. Will this do?
He indicates a low, flat tombstone. They sit down.
That will do beautifully. What a view one gets from here, and the air so soft and clear today.
Yes.
Oh, I know what you want to talk about, of course. But what is the use? The time's past. They're in the vestry by now, asking where they are to sign their names. If you loved Alicia, why didn't you tell her so? Why didn't you marry her?
Instead of leaving her to that brute.
He is not a brute.
Oh, no. Excellent young man. Will be a baronet one of these days. I did not tell her because I loved her. There was never the ghost of a chance for me. While I said nothing, I could still hang on and hang on. If I had spoken, that would have ended everything at once. I was happy enough. I never expected her to care about me. I was content as long as she did not care about some other man.
Even if she had cared about you, you could not have... Well, as we're speaking plainly, you know her people would never have permitted it.
If she had cared for me, they couldn't have stopped it. I've not been stopped by my circumstances. I have been stopped by myself. That would be humiliating if I ever had any pride. I was the hopeless detrimental. By all the rules of the game, I ought to be handsome, and accomplished, and beloved, and my rival, as he is wealthy and a germ of a baronet, ought to be hideous, and old, and stupid, and she ought to be marrying him against her will at the instigation of an ambitious mother. The reverse is the case. Why, he's an abominably handsome man.
Do you think so?
Of course. Don't you?
He's not bad-looking.
Then he has all the accomplishments. The poor and lowly-born ought, according to all the stories, to come out strongly here. What rubbish! Accomplishments mean education, and education means money. I can't shoot, or ride, or fence, and I have the cheek to call myself a man. There's not a single thing that I can think of that I can do except paint, and a good many people would tell you that I can't do that.
Do you really think him so very accomplished?
Haven't I just said so?
So you did. Go on.
And he's also a good fellow. I don't suppose he's much more of a saint than other men.
How dare you say that? It's the cowardly thing men always say when they meet a better man than themselves. One has only to look at him to...
Well?
Leave it. Go on.
I didn't mean to imply that he forged checks or picked pockets. I'm not interested enough in him to want to do him an injustice. That's honest. It's not affectation. My trouble is not that she has married him, but that she should have married anybody. A moment ago, when I was laboriously doing him justice, commending his points, you did not seem to believe me. But when I hint at the possibility of spots on the sun, you turn again and rend me. What can I say to please you?
Nothing. Nothing can please me. I know you have suffered, though you speak flippantly or even cynically, but I can hardly pity you. It is your own fault. You must have known that she would marry. You can't have supposed that your silly philandering could go on forever.
It was not silly, and it was not philandering, and I did not suppose it could go on forever. But though the child knows that its bun is finite, it is none the happier when it has finished it. And though I knew somewhere at the back of my head that she would marry, I shook thinking about it. One does not care to think of the fall of an angel.
Spare me the rhapsodies. You should have spoken to her.
We've been through all that. Do you, yourself, think she could ever have cared for me?
Oh, I don't know. She thought that you could paint. She told me so once.
Did she? What were her words? How did she say it? Oh, what does it matter? Even if I could paint, what would it matter? Women don't love men for that.
A long pause. Anna sits with her head resting on her hands, looking far into the blue. Edward paces to and fro miserably, but sits down again when she speaks.
Did you send anything?
A wedding present? Yes. Silver candlesticks.
You should have sent one of your pictures.
Too personal. And what did you give them?
Fish slice.
Why?
Is there anything more unromantic than a fish slice?
No.
Well, that's why.
Oh.
There is another long pause. The sound of cheering comes faintly up from the valley below. A look of irritation passes over his face as he hears it. White butterflies dance in the sun, and he watches them. Suddenly he speaks.
Lord, what a beautiful day for the sacrifice. Why are the wedding ceremonies performed in public?
Oh, I don't know.
It's appalling. Alicia and that brute beside her with everybody in the church staring. Alicia in the newspapers. Alicia all in white with her train of bridesmaids. Why, what am I saying? You were to have been the first bridesmaid yourself. Why—
No, that's wrong.
I'm sure I was told so.
People say anything.
But you're not there. Good heavens! Why didn't that strike me before? Not even there. I go on talking about myself and— well?
You don't think that a father, a mother, 2 sons and a daughter are about enough from one house, that the other daughter hadn't better stop at home or go for a walk?
No, Miss Larose, not in this case. You ought not to have absented yourself. You were her best friend almost, weren't you?
That's a strong phrase. I can't say. Talk about yourself again.
I'm an insufferable, unmanly, unattractive fool, and I've had the cheek to break my heart just as if I were somebody. There's the last word about me. Pass on. Alicia?
Oh, spare me. I know the colour of her eyes and hair, and how long she takes to do it as a general thing. Pass, Alicia.
Then we'll discuss the bridegroom route.
No.
Why not?
I said no. Leave it, please.
Then we return to you again. Why are you not at the wedding? Oh, happy thought! You are in the same position as I am. You are smitten with the charms of the noble and high-souled bridegroom. You are the maid that never told her love, but let the worm of something or other, never could remember quotations, play the deuce with her damask cheek. Your aching heart—
He stops suddenly, seeing the look on her face and realizing that unconsciously and unintentionally his stupid jibe has hit right home.
I beg your pardon. I'd no idea. I'm terribly sorry. How can I have made such a brutal blunder? Anna, for God's sake, don't cry. Forgive me.
Anna, rising to her feet.
I am not going to cry. I forgive you. You never meant to hurt me. I know that. After all, why shouldn't you know? I would sooner cut my tongue out than tell a woman. I would sooner hold my hand in the fire than let a woman know. But we are in the same condemnation, aren't we? And I feel what you said just now, that we are out of the world up here on this hilltop, and can say things that we should never have dreamed of in the streets below. Why, it's almost like being dead. Afterwards, when we come down from here, never speak of it again to me. It was not his fault. Thank God he never knew. He won't be able to talk me over with Alicia, at least. Oh, how tired I am. How tired I am.
I wonder if there is anything that I could say. No.
Edward? I don't think I ever called you by that name before. Shall we be real friends?
Yes, dear. Always.
He takes her hand and kisses it.
It will be all over by now. Shall I take you home?
They go down the hill in silence and hand in hand. Sometimes they slip a little on the close-cropped turf, but they feel more than mortal all the same. They pause a moment at the foot of the hill.
I shall tell them that the walk has quite cured my headache. Don't come any further with me, please. Mamma is asking you for the 6th, dinner. I hope you will be able to come.
It will give me much pleasure.
Goodbye, Mr. Hearn.
Goodbye, Miss Larose.
End of Act 2. Act 3 of 3 Dialogues by Barry Payne. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Act 3. Death.
Reverend James Theodore Blake. Read by Philip Gould.
Mrs. Edith Blake. Read by Beth Thomas.
Hector. Read by Todd.
And narrated by Devorah Allen. The scene is the dining room at number 23 Alberto Parade, Hoxley-on-Sea, where the Reverend James Theodore Blake has a curacy. He is considered to have married beneath him. The oval table is laid for breakfast. At one side Mrs. Blake presides over a block tin percolator and 2 plain and practical cups, flanked by a milk jug of a different pattern. She has 39 years, 11 stone 8, a double chin, no corsets, these will occur later in the morning, and a pale blue dressing gown that is due at the cleaner's. James has a weak, thin face, and gazes abstractedly at a hot water dish surmounted by a pewter cover. He bends towards it and closes his eyes.
Benedictus bendicat.
He lifts the pewter cover and turns to his wife.
Have you any preference, Edith?
There's not much difference between kippers. Give me the smallest.
The smaller.
Smaller, then. I seem to put off my appetite this morning.
I don't think that is a very happy phrase, is it, Edith?
Oh, do keep your temper, James. I do my best, but Rome wasn't built in a day. These things slip out. Why don't you open your letters? There may be a fortune in them.
As he speaks, he opens his letters one by one.
Barkham for the kitchen sink, 2 and 3.
Barkham knows how to stick it on. I could have done it myself if I'd had a cane.
Barkham was only here 20 minutes. I timed him. The canon regrets that he will be unable to dine on Thursday.
Well, that's something saved.
True.
At the next letter he pauses and puts his hand over his eyes.
Edith, my Aunt Alicia is dead.
What? At last?
Edith!
Well, you always said when she died our troubles would be over.
But do not forget that I have lost an aunt.
No, of course not. Does the letter say anything?
It is from the solicitor. It appears I am the residuary legatee.
What does that mean?
I am given to understand that I inherit almost the whole of her fortune.
Well, it never rains, but it pours.
You seem to forget that I have lost an aunt.
But you only saw her 3 times in your life.
An aunt is still an aunt.
And she was a ritualist.
But beneath these outward forms she has shown that she had a strong sense of duty. She has recognized that all we have is only held on trust, and that it is our duty to leave it to our nearest kin. This will be a disappointment to the Wildersons. I cannot profess to be sorry in that respect. Yes, there is some justice in this imperfect world after all.
Oh, James, if only you knew how happy I feel.
Must I say it again? I have lost a dear aunt.
Yes, oh yes, I'm sure I feel that too. What you must do, James, is to keep yourself up. It's not a question of expense any more. And however reluctant you may be, you must not let yourself break down. Think what a lot of business is going to be thrown on your hands. In that case, I think 1 kipper is an insufficient breakfast for a man. Now, even against your own inclination, couldn't you—
I should never have thought of it if you had not mentioned it. You are always so practical, Edith. I leave that branch entirely to you. Shall we say an egg, boiled or poached, whichever gives the least trouble?
I'll run and poach a couple of eggs for you myself. The girl's upstairs with the children.
Do not say gel. Say the servant, or call her by her name. Martha.
Oh, what a one you are for grammar. Martha, then. Now, I'll be off, and here's Hector come to say good morning.
As she goes out, Hector enters. He is a remarkably plain boy of 9, with a very solemn demeanour, suggesting great age. He shakes hands with his father.
Good morning, Father. Is there anything of importance in the paper this morning?
I have not yet opened the paper this morning. My attention has been occupied with some sad news which has just reached me by post. A dear aunt of mine has passed away.
Oh, let me see. Your aunt would be my great-aunt.
Yes, my boy, she was your great-aunt Alicia.
I do not remember that I ever met her, and the relation does not seem to be very close. Don't you think that, under the circumstances, it would be enough if I had a black band on the sleeve of my light suit? I suggest it because I know we are not rich, and the expense of a new black suit is considerable. The money might be spent in other ways that I could tell you of.
No, Hector, I wish you to be dressed in complete mourning. You are so much older than your years that I may mention to you what, in an ordinary way, a father would not discuss with a boy of 9. By the death of my Aunt Alicia I became a rich man, and am intending to give up this curacy and to adopt a style of life more in accordance with the means that Providence has been pleased to bestow on me. The price of your new clothes is a matter no longer of any great importance.
Oh?
He reflects a minute, and then puts his question somewhat bluntly.
Are you more sorry she's dead, or more glad you're rich?
How can you ask such a question?
Well, I didn't know.
The loss of an aunt must inevitably— Ah, there's your mother.
Edith enters with the poached and supplemental eggs on a very hot plate, which she is anxious to put down quickly.
There, James, 2 beauties. Mind the plate. I've pretty nigh burnt my hands off with it.
Thank you. You are very good. I shall enjoy these. Hector, go outside for a moment.
Hector goes out.
Don't say pretty nigh, my dear. Say very nearly.
All right, dear, very nearly. You can come in again, Hector.
It is time I went up to take the children in the multiplication table.
What a good boy he is, not a bit like other boys. Really, he is a great help, and there's nothing he won't do. He is working a pair of slippers for himself. Wonderful.
When I have recovered from the blow which I received this morning, it will be some pleasure to think that we shall now be able to put the education of the children on a different basis. Hector must go to school, ultimately to Eton. The younger children will have a governess. I shall, in all probability, accept a college living where the income is practically nothing, that is, of no importance to us, but the vicarage is large and situated in a pretty country. There will be an ample garden and so forth. I shall look out for a place where the work is light, and I shall employ a curate. I shall in that way have leisure for those literary pursuits which are most to my taste, and perhaps are more valuable than purely parochial work. I have sometimes felt that at present I am a razor used for cutting wood.
That's true enough, I'm sure.
Even the little I have been able to find time for has not been without promise and profit.
You mean what you write for the papers?
I have made on an average 7 shillings from the comic halfpennyworth alone. I've also had the occasional work in the Children's Sunday, the editor of which says he will always be glad to consider anything of mine. And you must remember, Edith, that has been done under very trying circumstances. There has been the worry about money, and I have no working room, and my time has been very limited, and I have suffered from the want of a proper holiday. When I start work in a spacious and well-furnished library, looking out onto beautiful grounds, invigorated by good food, refreshed by a long holiday on the continent every year without a care, not overworked, taking riding exercise every afternoon—
Oh, James!
Then I think I may be able to produce something in comparison with which what has gone before will seem but child's play.
Oh, James! Shall we keep a horse, then?
Our position will make it essential that we shall keep horses, and there will be a pony for the children as well, I hope. But in the meantime there is much to be done. You must order mourning for yourself and the children. Let it be plain, but of the best quality. It should be put in hand this morning. I must go up north tonight. The solicitor wishes to see me about the funeral. In fact, I gather that the whole matter is left more or less in my hands.
Poor James! I don't envy you the long journey in a wretched 3rd class.
Under the circumstances, I shall go by sleeping saloon.
Oh, you don't think there will be any difficulty about ready money? Of course it's coming, but still—
The solicitor will advance anything that I may require. He implies as much in his letter, and puts it very delicately. I shall certainly employ him. Tact, that is what one wants in a solicitor.
I almost feel as if I should open my eyes and find it all a dream.
Alas, it is no dream. She has gone. The end was peaceful. She was 83. I shall never shake her by the hand again.
You were never what could be called intimate, though, were you? It's not as if—
An aunt must always be an aunt.
Well, yes.
I trust I shall bear the blow with fortitude and resignation. But the tie of blood is a very real one. She has shown that herself. During her life the Wildersons saw far more of her than I did, but at the last the claim of relationship told. I'm not sorry for the Wilkersons. I consider they did their best to rob me.
Hector enters, wearing a pained expression.
I am sorry to say that Henrietta refuses to learn anything, and has been impertinent.
You run along. I dare say if the truth were known, there are faults on both sides.
I hope not.
Well, I'll come in a minute.
Thank you.
He goes out.
I suppose I may write to my 2 sisters?
Certainly.
They'll like to hear the good news. I mean, I must break it to them about your Aunt Alicia.
I think the latter is the better way of expressing it. You must remember that money is not everything.
No, James. I shall be better able to see that now.
She goes out. James rises from the table and paces to and fro. His expression is one of gravity and solemnity. As his thoughts flit on, the expression changes, giving place to a broad and ecstatic smile. He rubs his large, fat hands softly together. End of Act 3. End of 3 Dialogues by Barry Payne.